Hi, welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Melissa Nielsen with Waldorf Essentials, and this week we're going to be talking about learning struggles. So, in our past podcast, we talked about teaching a reluctant child, and learning struggles are a bit different. So, usually, if you've got a reluctant child that also has learning struggles, then we have to look at things in a different way. Yes, you want all the connection pieces that I talked about in that video or in that podcast, but you also want to look at a different layer. So, I'm actually going to say some things about learning struggles that are probably going to really irritate some people. And that's okay. I'm a big girl. I can handle your hate. But I'm just saying, really, from a big picture standpoint, we are at too big of a rush to diagnose in our culture. Way too big of a rush. Where I know that this idea of early intervention and all of that. I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all because it really does not allow the child to unfold. So I am not of the public school mindset that we have to jump in and have early intervention. I'm actually the opposite mindset. And I thought today we would talk a little bit about that and talk about sort of where you can be in each age group to help your child that might be struggling. So again, this was part of a real series that I was going to do, but I figured there were too many pieces. It would be easier to just put it together in a podcast. So here you have a podcast. You can listen to it again and again. You can send it to people that think that you are crazy for wanting to do things this way, or take it to, if you've got a practitioner that you're working with for your child when it comes to learning struggles, have them listen to it. I think on the whole, they're going to come to the same conclusions that I have. I've been a parent for almost 30 years. I have children that have had learning disabilities, learning struggles. I have autism in my house. I have ADHD. I have three children with ADHD, and I have ADHD. And we have things going on that often are handled in a mainstream way much differently than I would handle them at home. And handling that at home the way I have allows the children to then grow up realizing that, hey, wait, they actually are taking part in their own mental health and well-being and their own struggles and their own challenges. And it's not just we're popping a pill and fixing it. And I'm a child of the 80s, and there was lots of pill popping in that time period. Lots of kids that were just stuck on Ritalin and just to help the school systems cope. And we still have a lot of that today in the school system, but I have to tell you, that's one of the reasons why I've homeschooled. So hopefully this podcast will help you in that regard. When it comes to, I'd say, early childhood, I want you to remember that as per Steiner recommendations, this is a place of no academics. So really you shouldn't have, unless you have a larger diagnosis of, say, autism that's severe or maybe other cognitive challenges, you're really not looking to get any diagnoses in this early childhood stage. You're really in a space of like just life. Life happens, right? It is rhythmic. You're looking at books together, you're singing together, you're walking together, you're having this beautiful rhythmic life where your child is allowed to be held and unfold. And in that time, many things are going to happen that are probably going to line things up even if it's not just based on the regular timetable of things. So I would say during this time period, we did lots of beeswax modeling. Beeswax is great because it really works with that fine motor. So if you've got a child that's got lots of sensory issues and fine motor, beeswax or clay. Play-Doh I don't like as much. Not just because it smells bad if you buy it at Walmart, but also because it is too soft. So it does not give the resistance that their hands need when it comes to building up those muscles. So if you've got a child, especially later, if they've got dysgraphia or something like that, where you're really trying to build up those hand muscles and you're seeing, they need that fine motor piece, I would utilize beeswax and then regular old clay and something that really helps build those hand muscles. Also, you want fat crayons. Those fat crayons that we use in Waldorf, don't use the skinny Crayola crayons because the skinny crayons really do not support good hand movement. And especially in this early stage, you really want them to just to just use their hands, as much as possible. And you're not stressing so much about grip when they're this age. When they are below 7, when they're not doing academics, if they've got their hand gripped around a pen or a crayon and they're coloring like this, that's pretty age appropriate. The grip will come later, and it will come generally as their development gets to a place where they're ready to write their name, and then you can be working on grip. I would say many, now, and I didn't say all, but many children sort out by kindergarten. I know that might sound crazy and you might think, oh my gosh, but we have to have all this early intervention. I remember when my youngest was, when she was in this early childhood space, she was nonverbal for, gosh, she didn't speak until she was like 4, 3, 4. Samuel was her translator. So if we didn't have Super Sam, we would never have known what she said. I remember she had certain words for certain things. Like she used to call, we lived in San Diego, so we were at the aquarium all the time and at the beach. She used to call jellyfish, she used to call them diapers. And I remember thinking that is the weirdest thing, child, that you could call jellyfish. Her word for water was barse. Like it was something that made no sense, but once she knew that that's what it was, and she refused to do sign language. I had other children that did sign language. She would get so mad. She would grab my hand and say no. Mm-mm. Like she would get so angry when I would try to sign with her. And so she was really hard to communicate with. And it wasn't until she started doing some therapeutic gear with me when she was about 3 years old that things changed. And then she got into karate when she was almost 5. Things changed some more. So that movement piece, that like whole body movement, is what she needed to get the speech going. We did do speech therapy for a while, but we were kicked out because I'm a non-vaxxer. And so they wouldn't let us come back. And so I thought, all right, well, I already have the tools that you've given me. We had the cards, and we just did a lot of like books that she could point to the dog and point to the cat and say the sweater and slide and those sorts of things. So we did those kinds of things with her, but we also just let her unfold. And the longer she had to unfold, like you would never know now that she had speech delay. Ever. Never, never, never. She is very well spoken at almost 15 years old. Well spoken, is a beautiful writer, like does handwork galore. Like this is a child that you would never have known that she has had this delay, because it's seriously like she has been like taking the time to catch up on all those years that she couldn't speak when she was little. So if you've got a child that's in this space, please, please, please do not let the world stress you out. Get to know your child. Spend some time in prayer and meditation about your child. Really understand, talk to their angel, understand their spirit. What is it that they really need from you? And I'm not saying that you won't at some point need some sort of intervention, because that happens. Of course it happens. I'm just saying it's not as necessary as our culture would have you think. Children that are blossoming and growing and are in a beautiful environment, and they're not like overly taxed with media, overly taxed with food that's not good for them, in situations that's not good for them, they generally don't have these challenges as often. So now in my case, my daughter was a preemie. So I knew when she was born. I can remember because my oldest has autism. There's a look. If you're a mom of autism, you know the look. There's a look in their eyes. And I remember when I was packing her up to bring her home from the hospital, because she was preemie, she was supposed to be a home birth. Didn't happen that way. Packing her up to take her home from the hospital, and I saw the look, and I got on my knees and I was like, what are you doing to me? Like, what? I have been through this. And he said, you have been through this. So you know what you're looking at. You know what you're dealing with. And even though she doesn't have autism, she definitely has some sensory things that she is very much outgrowing in her teenage years. And she's always been a sensitive child. But I had to really make sure I connected with her. And oddly, she ended up being the child that she and I are the exact same temperament. And there are many times that my mother's like, she reminds me so much of you when you were that age. And it's so interesting to me because I'm like, really? That doesn't make any sense to me, but okay. So like when you're working with these children, please, please, please don't label them before it's necessary. It would be very nice if you could walk through and just let them unfold. because that label sticks with them. You know, my oldest son has autism. Yes, he has autism. And yes, it's a label. And he needs it for, sometimes he has to explain to somebody, listen, I have autism. There are some situations I don't totally get. That's okay. But he doesn't wear it. It's not like it's not worn on him like it is owns him. So I want you to be really careful about how you're bringing it to your children, how you are talking to them about the challenges they have. Like I said, I have kids with ADHD, and I have ADHD. But I make it my superpower. I tried to teach my children how to make it their superpower so that it didn't have to become a crutch, so that it didn't have to become something that made them feel ashamed or made them feel like they were less than. So take the time to really get to know, dive into this space. Don't just look at mainstream culture and mainstream diagnoses. Like dive in. What are other people doing that are not maybe they've got the same things going on, but maybe they're not doing exactly the same thing that the mainstream thinks that you should be doing for this child. Don't be afraid to think outside the box and to really get to know your child and really dive into that space of connection. Okay, so if we're talking about a child in the grades, it changes a little bit. So again, don't be quick to diagnose. Even if you've got a child that is, say, showing up with what you're worried might be dyslexia, that is a space where, you want to be aware. I have dyslexia, so, but I tell you, 19 in 1980, nobody was paying attention to that. They were like, something's going on with Melissa. But I had to learn to overcome those things. So I am very much a person who wants to teach others how to overcome. So I didn't overcome because somebody coddled me. I overcame because I figured my brain was working differently. Not only did I have this ADHD thing going, but letters and words were not coming out the way they were coming out for everybody else. So I had to learn how to adjust with that. And again, I'm not saying don't get help, not saying that at all. But there are plenty of things that you can do in the case of, say, dyslexia before you jump in to get a diagnosis. And again, I'm also not saying that you're not going to need a diagnosis at some point. I have plenty of parent friends that have children who have dyslexia, that have severe dyslexia, and that does happen, but it is not as prevalent as people would have you think. So again, in that first grade space, you're still just doing the letters. And we actually have it's in our Thinking, Feeling, Willing program. It's also in our early grades program, first, second, and third. And it's a module called Reading, Writing, and Spelling. And we lay out the exact method so that you can take them from learning their first letter to reading. And in that time, you can fill in gaps. You can figure out, where is it that my child is struggling? Because here's what most people just don't realize. They go, oh, Waldorf doesn't work. But then they go to, say, the Barton counselor or other dyslexia counselors, and guess what they make them do? A lot of the same stuff. They're still going to make you read with your child. They're still going to make you be in a space where your child is actively participating in that daily. So do it this way first so that when you go, you can say, this is what we've been doing. It's so much better when you go see that therapist or that reading help, that dyslexia counselor, when you can say, okay, for the last year, this is what we've been doing. This is what I've noticed. This is where I can see they're improving. This is where I see they're not, because that's data. That's data that they need in order to be able to help you and your child on your journey. So I'm not saying don't ever go for a diagnosis. I'm just saying don't be quick, because you're going to have to do a lot of the same things after you get the diagnosis that you are beforehand. Also, don't give up and on your child and just let them use the iPad constantly, dive into media. Like, don't be that parent. Don't be the parent that you see like that's just sort of given up on helping their child. Stay connected with them. Know that you are their lifeline. Like, there are things that my ex-husband and my husband could have never gotten my oldest child to do. Actually, any of the children, because there is something about mom. There is something about mom. We know how far we can push them. We know at what point they're going to be like giving up and flying over the edge. So we need to keep that connection alive because we are the ones that sort of are that barometer for them. We know what they can handle, what they can't. We know, like, hey, you know what? It's really cold outside. He's really not going to want to wear a coat today. So I'm just going to make sure he's wearing a long sleeve shirt. Like, really being able to pay attention to those things until your child can do that for themselves is really important. And mom is the one that is going to be the person that is their person that is going to be helping them with that. Consequently, you're probably also going to be the topic of therapy at some point because you pushed and they were like, oh no, you pushed, but they will come back and around. I promise they will come back around and they'll be like, thank you so much for pushing. Just make sure that you are in a good centered space and that you are coming at it from a space of really wanting to be a conscious parent and really wanting to connect with this child in that way. Okay, my notes here. Like I said, even with a diagnosis, you're still going to have to do the work. And I like to share this story about my son with autism. So when he was about 9, we were in like the third custody battle with my ex-husband, and he was fighting me about autism. He didn't want to admit that autism was a thing, and I'm like, no, there's something going on. And so finally, I was able to get the courts to give us a court-ordered diagnosis space. And I only did that, like I said, because I needed his dad to be like, oh. Maybe I need to be paying attention to these things. And his dad was not willing to do that at the time. I think today he would be, but we all grow, right? This was like 30 years ago, 20 years ago. So, in that space, we had a psychologist that went through and did a battery of tests with my son, and it took like a week. At the end of the week, he was like, "Yeah, your kid has autism." I was like, "Yeah, tell me something I don't know." And he said, "But really, there's nothing I can tell you to do." And I remember sitting in his office and feeling like deflated at first. He said, but this is why. He said, all of the parents I talk to, I tell them to cut the media. All the parents I talk to, I tell them to pay attention to their diet. All the parents I talk to, I tell them to get their kids moving. He said, and you're doing all those things. So I can write it in the report here so that your ex-husband has to do them. But please know you're already doing all of the things that your child needs. And I remember, like I said, at first I was deflated, but then I thought, oh, I instinctively was doing this. So I wanted a Waldorf life for my children. And because I was following that, I was already doing those things. We were already low media. I can remember I think one of the first movies my son ever watched was Little Women, like the old one, and he cried. And he was like 6 years old. And this emotional, it was so like overwhelming to him that the characters were just so beautiful because he'd not seen many movies. In fact, it may have been the very first movie that he saw. I remember my ex-husband was like, "What did you do to him? You broke him." I'm like, "No, he's just moved by this movie." But he was so young, and we did not have a lot of media. At the time, we had one TV. It was small. It was not in the center of the house. And so it was not something that happened very often. It was not an often thing. And so that was the best thing he needed. Now, today, my son can play a video game, listen to a podcast, and have a conversation with you all at the same time while on Twitch. I don't understand his brain, but he didn't have that as a child, and it probably actually made him better at those things later. So I just sort of laugh sometimes. I'm like, you were the most Waldorf child, and now you're like the least Waldorf adult. But that's okay. That's okay because I still love him. He is very good at what he does. Okay, so other things, keep going with the curriculum, even if they are struggling and they need content to be adjusted. So that doesn't mean you don't give the story content. The story content is what goes with the age. So keep in mind that, third grade is going to be those that farming content, Old Testament stories, the Hebrew tales, that sort of thing. Fourth grade is going to be, the Norse stories, all of that. So it's the content that needs to be there. If your child is not reading, then read to them. Read to them. Do not keep them from having that content. Also, look for audiobooks with the same content. That's often really helpful when you've got a child with dyslexia or that's struggling with some reading things. And don't stop. Just because they're struggling does not mean you should stop. It means you should stay the course because that child is not going to be 8, 9, or 10 forever. They're going to be 15 at some point, and you want to have that space where you can build those blocks so that they don't get to a place where they're feeling really bad about themselves. So be their biggest cheerleader all the time and always be looking for ways to connect even when you are struggling. Let's see. The other thing I talked about clay work. Clay work really helps the wrists. And I would say this is good for even kids that don't have dysgraphia. Super Sam is my one very neurotypical child out of five. And he really, like when he was little, he could not open the applesauce container. And so we just clay work. We did clay work, loosened up his wrists, and then he was fine after that. He didn't have any other things going on. So really just thinking about what you can do within what you've already got to really help and connect with your child, I think is the most important part. Now, if you've got more questions about learning struggles or other pieces, please know this is not exhaustive. This is just my thoughts off the top of my head. Please come to office hours and talk with me about things. I'm always happy to give you some ideas in real time, and we can talk about your child specifically. Office hours are free in 2026, so it's an opportunity for you to come, get the support that you need, and have a little mom time and breathe out just a little bit. All right, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.
Homeschool parents, this is a message for you. As a homeschooler, I know you work hard for us. You have many different things to manage.
Our Thinking, Feeling, Willing program is your roadmap to a successful Waldorf homeschool journey. Gain the confidence you need to be the teacher your child wants and transform your homeschool experience. Homeschooling with Waldorf Essentials is one like no other. You not only have curriculum options, you can also add our Thinking, Feeling, Willing program onto your curriculum. What's in the Thinking, Feeling, Willing program? Rhythm, inner work, temperament, the Waldorf curriculum, learning and strengthening your skills in music, circle time, form drawing, handwork, painting, drawing, modeling, festivals, reading, writing, spelling, eurythmy and movement, and our bonus content. Something else you'll get when you join Waldorf Essentials that you will not find anywhere else is the community, and we all need that as homeschoolers.
This is your invitation to fill your cup. We know you're rooting for us. We are rooting for you too.